All right. Welcome everyone to my Solace podcast. Today we have Cheryl Drury from First Step Solutions, and today we're talking all about dating and sexual relationships. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you for having me, Cheryl. So my name is Cheryl Drury. I am the director of First Step Solutions and the Click Connection. So the Click Connection's our latest baby, which is a online app. So for friendship and for dating for the NDIS community, and First Step Solutions was our first baby. We do education on having safe relationships.
Excellent. So tell me a little bit more about that. I mean, I know that I've heard dateability program pretty much everywhere. You are in Townsville?
So throughout Australia, we've got multiple locations in all the states. We still need to get into Darwin, so that's our next mission. But we've got several locations in each of our states.
Perfect. All right. So tell me a little bit about dateability.
So dateability has grown to be a 12-week program. So it started off as a little 4-weeker, thinking we'll just talk about safe relationships and how do we start safe relationships. I had assumed sex education was assumed knowledge, and that was a mistake. So we've actually had to grow the program over the last 3 years to make sure we're covering everything to do with yourself in a relationship as well as sex education and everything in between.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges and misconceptions for people who are living with a disability.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and it's actually a human right that everybody has safe relationships.
Yep.
So not understanding that is the biggest issue. So people with disability still have the same urges as everybody else.
Yep.
So I think we need to take away that stigma of dating with a disability versus they just want to date. It's human. It's human.
Absolutely.
So human connection is really important. So I think knowing that is how we base everything of everybody wants to connect.
Yep. Yep. Because, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, we are all humans and we all have the same needs, the same urges. And that is definitely the connection. People with disability tend to sort of be put in this bucket of, they don't have needs, they don't have wants. But I guess working with younger age group, within this industry, we see that, we hear that, and that's pretty much a topic that's not spoken about.
And I think it's the not speaking about it that's the issue.
Yeah.
Because that means we're not educating.
Yeah,
if we assume someone with disability shouldn't be dating, and we do hear this a lot, then actually we're not educating them how to do it safely.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the biggest risk. So that's why everything comes back to having the safe relationships and how do we teach someone to do that? And it's not a disability factor. It's an every person factor. We talk about boundaries and consent.
Yeah.
This is brand new into schools.
Yeah.
So it only just got added to curriculum.
Yeah.
Gives me hope for the future. But at the same time, if we're just teaching kids this now in mainstream schools, how do we expect people with disabilities to just automatically understand how to set a boundary and understand what consent is?
No, I actually agree with that. I agree with that. As my kids growing up, they actually don't know anything about sex, and it comes from families. We actually have to educate them ourselves. The schools really don't want anything to do with that, especially some of those Catholic education where it's a bit of a taboo. So, yeah, you're right.
We actually look at sex education in schools as really covering the fundamental on fertility and how to not get pregnant and how babies are made.
Yeah.
We don't actually inspire anything around positive sexuality.
Yeah.
We don't talk about how sex can be a really amazing thing if you know what you like and are comfortable discussing that.
Yeah.
But we don't discuss that at school. So it makes it a really challenging thing. And I think we talk about consent in a way of during sex.
Yeah.
But actually consent is part of our everyday conversation.
Yes.
So if we don't have the empowerment to be able to say, hey, I don't like it when you call me at 11 o'clock at night. I don't like it when you expect me to pay for dinner.
Yeah.
Then how do we expect people to be able to speak up for themselves when in a high-pressure situation like sex?
Yeah.
So it's something that we need to learn much sooner in relationships, not just sexual relationships, but all relationships.
Absolutely. But those boundaries as well, as we were talking about before was, the story I told you about this young lady who literally told, a partner who said, you're moving too fast for me. Obviously for someone with a disability, that's really, really hard to speak about or to say to somebody. But at the end of the day, if that's how she feels, then that's how she feels. And you know what, Cheryl? She actually learned that from, your Dateability program. It came from that.
I love that.
And, talking to that gentleman who was rejected, he felt crushed. However, he accepted the fact that he was moving too fast and he moved on from that.
I think we've actually just added in a new topic, and that's around breakups and heartbreaks, because it wasn't included. And we've even had feedback from a mum going, do we have to talk about breakups?
But we have
They've never had a nice relationship. Let's not scare them.
But it happens.
It's life,
It
right?
happens.
The majority of your relationships end in breakup.
Absolutely.
So not knowing how to deal with that is just setting you up to fail.
Yeah.
Because I think often, especially with people with disability, we'll see the movies.
Yeah.
They've got these, human urges. They want the love. They want this relationship, and they see the fairy tale.
Yes.
And reality sets in.
Yeah.
So I think making sure that, that's part of it.
Yeah.
And how do we look after ourselves? And it comes to the self-care. And, our first module is on self-awareness.
Yeah.
And what do you like? And what are you bringing to a relationship? Because it's not always about the other person.
Absolutely.
And I used to hear this, I'm single, you're single.
Yeah.
That'll do.
Yeah.
And that's not a grounds for a happy relationship.
Self-awareness is huge, even for people without a disability.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not self-aware, you can't make great decisions. Do you know what I mean? And how do you teach someone with, say, an intellectual disability about being more self-aware? That's a hard topic, isn't it? So, so you guys are really hitting those hard topics.
We have to, because if we're not, no one's having these conversations.
Yeah.
We have a game, it's called the qualities game, and it's qualities that you bring into a relationship, and what are your deal breakers, and what are you looking for? So your top 5 qualities in a partner.
Yeah.
And what are your deal breakers? Because they're going to change for every person.
Yeah.
And often that's when you're like, oh, hang on a second. That guy I've been dating actually doesn't fit my boxes. So until you know what you're looking for, anyone will fit.
Yeah.
Whereas now you can start being a bit more selective and a bit more self-aware and stand up for yourself. Actually, I don't like it when you do that.
Yeah.
Which is a really important thing to say in all relationships. Something else that we think is essential, and it's kind of a misleading dateability, that friendships are the most important relationships we're going to have.
Yeah.
Because without those friends, how do you have a safe, healthy relationship?
Absolutely.
I think the relationships become all consuming. That's when the obsession happens.
Yeah.
Because you've got nothing else. So you're going to hang on to this romantic relationship with 2 hands.
Absolutely.
And smother it.
Yeah.
So making sure you've got those friends in your corner to go, hey, do you think it's right that she does this?
Yeah. Someone to actually talk with, bounce off with. So, I completely understand that.
Sometimes you don't want that parent to have that conversation.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. So red flags. Do you talk about red flags with, with your with people with disability?
Yeah, it's a huge topic.
Yeah.
Red flags online and also in real life.
Yeah.
So there's some great collateral out there about, hey, maybe this is how coercive behaviours start to happen.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's never a red flag. It's very rarely a red flag right from the beginning. It's kind of an amber flag of like, oh, that's a behaviour I'm not really sure about. Let me watch that. Because if they led their, first foot was a red flag, you would run.
Yeah.
So it tends to be an amber flag to begin with. And you're just like, hang on, let me just see how this goes because this might not be okay.
Yeah.
And having those people and that coercive control happens when you don't have your people.
Yeah.
They cut off your access to your people.
Yes.
So you've got no one to second guess what's happening in the relationship. But I think the red flags online is huge. And it's kind of the whole reason Dateability started. I was teaching finance skills and we had a person who had been scammed online dating, $160,000.
Wow.
And this is my first introduction
Yeah.
to this. And I was like, oh, my God, we need to do more education here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is that understanding that online dating is a whole new world, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And I think online, you feel like the relationships progress so much faster.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not remembering that this is still a stranger.
Absolutely.
If I've never met this person,
Yep.
you're a stranger. But because you're discussing and chatting with them in your own intimate environment, so you're sitting in bed, texting together,
Yes.
it feels
it's easier.
intimate.
Absolutely. It's definitely easier to let your guards down, have those conversations that you wouldn't normally have a conversation about face to face, isn't it?
Yeah, it tends to move the relationship on a lot faster.
Yeah.
And the risks involved in that are huge because as soon as you let your guard down, and you probably wouldn't do that necessarily with a stranger.
Absolutely.
And the desire to really want to meet somebody.
Absolutely.
It's a combination of all things could go wrong.
We actually see a lot of that, even with younger people, not necessarily 18 and above. I've worked with a lot of younger ones who find themselves in a situation where they've been, they've found older men online. They've ended up meeting them, and it gets to that point where it becomes a bit scary for them. And putting aside someone with, a disability as well, if you add to that concept, that's even more scarier because they're then being taken advantage of. So I really like the Click Connection, what you've done there. So I believe I told you a while back, I started researching the Click Connection, and I think that was the stage where you guys were making some adjustments. And I really wanted to know a little bit more about that because, like what I said, working with the younger age group who are online, on Tinder, I wanted to introduce that to them. So tell me a bit more about the Click Connection and where that's come from.
So Click Connection came because a lot of our participants were having trouble on mainstream apps.
Yeah.
In two different ways. One, they were getting taken advantage of.
Yes.
They were exploited sexually or financially.
Yep.
And another one that really pulled on my heartstrings was people were saying to me during Dateability, do I have to say I have a disability on my dating profile?
Yeah.
And I thought about this a lot, and I was like, well, it's part of who you are.
Exactly.
So also, it's no one's business.
Yeah.
So I could go either way, but it also means you're hiding a piece of you as if you should be ashamed.
Yeah.
And it so goes against everything I believe.
Yeah.
So my thoughts around Click Connection was creating an app where everyone can be themselves.
Yep.
I saw this amazing profile of a woman who is a wheelchair user in the States.
Yeah.
And in every profile picture, she's got her chair.
Yeah.
In her profile, she says, looking for someone who's strong enough to carry me upstairs.
Yeah.
Making it
Love
really,
that. Yeah.
like owning it. This is who I am, and this is part
Absolutely.
of me.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to create a space where everyone felt safe and could be themselves.
Absolutely.
So we relaunched the app again in January this year. So it's been going for 6 months.
Yeah.
We are in every state.
Yep.
I think the big important things are that we onboard everybody.
Yeah.
So we're making sure everybody on the app is an NDIS participant.
Yep.
To make sure that we're not having looky-loos come past.
And it's that safe space that you're wanting to protect, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. And making sure everybody is over the age of 18.
Yeah.
Because we don't want anyone to be victimised.
Yes.
The other thing that everybody was saying on Click, and I have been led down this road by participants saying, you should do this, you should do that, is they want face-to-face events where they can be chatting with people. So we're throwing parties now in every state. My worst nightmare is actually throwing parties, and I do it now on a weekly basis. But that's okay. I'm leaning into the uncomfortable that no one will show up.
What does that party look like?
Well, it's changing up. So we've just done a run of painting and pizza.
Yeah. I saw that actually. Yeah.
So we're doing a Rubik's Cube party. Yeah. We're throwing a Time to Shine party here in Brisbane tonight.
That's awesome.
So we're throwing different things. I think Adelaide are screaming out that they want a karaoke night. So it's literally our participants saying we want to do this.
Yeah.
But we don't want to be a party provider.
Absolutely.
So we're actually going to be working more with other
Yeah.
providers in the community who
Yeah.
throw events.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
all the discos out there, please rename discos to something a little bit more age appropriate. But
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
just a little pet thing of mine.
Yeah.
But working with everybody that's throwing parties.
That's awesome. I can introduce you to another organisation actually, and that's a conversation we can have later on. Who will host? What you're doing. You probably know them already, but I think that's a great idea. Great idea.
It's not an area we want to be in. We want to be on the
Yeah.
education side. We want to do that
Absolutely.
piece. We don't want to be.
Take away what you guys are meant to be doing. However, though, I mean, having those events, is literally connecting again with the people that they're meeting online, which is a great thing. But yes, you don't want to take away what you're meant to be doing and focusing on other things.
We just had, I think it was last week, a pizza night in Adelaide, and two people who had met on the app
Yeah.
came on their first date.
Oh,
So it was like they'd been chatting. Oh, it was like
Yeah.
I loved it so much. They were holding hands, and
Yeah.
all the other women in the room were like, "Oh, I guess that one's taken."
Yeah.
But it meant that they were meeting in a safe environment.
Absolutely.
So they wanted to meet for the first time, but they're like, "Hey, let's go to this event where we know other people." And
right.
it's a lot of the times it's our counsellors who
Yeah.
do the Dateability program who
Yeah.
are running the events.
Yeah.
So it means that everyone's feeling comfortable and they
Yeah.
can step in if there's ever a moment of like, oh, I don't really want to be speaking to this person anymore. We
Yeah.
can be like, oh. Or we
Yeah.
are often a wingman. So someone will come up,
That's
oh,
awesome.
I kind of like that person over there.
Yeah.
And we reconstruct the room and all of a sudden they're having a sit next to each other.
I like
And
that.
I'm a really good wing girl.
So how does it work then with parents? There are some parents out there who tend to bubble wrap their children, and dating for them is quite a scary thing, for their child to go and do. I mean, what feedback do you get, or what have you heard parents say to you?
There is definitely two camps on this one.
Yeah.
So every expo I've ever attended, there will be a mum that comes up to me and says, I love what you do, but it's not for my child.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, then it's definitely for your child because then
Yeah.
you're not having the conversation.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think we've also seen the risks of
Yeah.
a sexual assault, for example, and
Yeah.
the young girl didn't know what was happening to her because no one had had that conversation.
Yeah.
So to me, it's someone needs to be having the conversation. So if the parent is
Absolutely.
not, then somebody should.
Yeah.
However, there's a lot of the parents who are on board and they're like,
Yeah.
okay, I'd rather you have the conversation than me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it is that education across the board. So we actually did start a guardian program
Okay.
for the teenagers that it's not as big as Dateability yet.
Yeah.
But it is for those teenage years, and we've got a parents group that's happening at the same time.
Isn't that great?
I think the parents need upskilling as well, right?
Absolutely.
I'm a mum, you're a mum. We need upskilling.
Absolutely. Especially having those awkward conversations with your teenagers. I remember all that.
My mum never gave me the talk, and I'd tell her
Well,
all the
I
time.
accidentally have had to have that talk. And it's not the best conversation that you have. I mean, every parent is different. But I think that's great. We're not just upskilling the children themselves or the people with the disabilities, actually their parents too.
Well, I think it kind of levels the playing field. My thought is like if you're both going in and learning at the same time,
Yeah.
it starts a conversation, right?
Absolutely.
So the parent could be driving home and saying, hey, you know what I learned today? Did you know that?
Yeah.
And now we're coming at a even playing field conversation rather than I'm going to give you a lecture about something that's going to make you uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the thing is I've done a whole bunch of training with Shine SA who are amazing.
Yeah.
And it's not one conversation.
Yeah.
That, back in our day, you got sat down, you had the birds and the bees
Yes.
chat, and that was it. We never talk about
Yeah.
this again.
Yeah.
Whereas actually it needs to be an ongoing conversation.
Absolutely.
Rather than once will do. Because especially with people with disability, repetition is really important.
Yes.
So it's going to be forgotten. So we have our oldest person who did Dateability and he was in his late 60s.
Yeah.
And now he was ready to start dating.
Wow.
He had to refresh everything he knew.
Yeah.
Online dating wasn't even a thing.
Yeah.
How do I do that? Boundaries and consent. He was coming out the gates hot.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, let's slow it
Yeah.
down. Maybe the first question to somebody shouldn't be, will you be my girlfriend?
Exactly.
Maybe
Yeah.
it should be, hey, how are you?
Yeah. Get to know each other, start a conversation with them.
It's really common. Actually, one of the other games we play during Dateability, it's a timeline of different sexual acts, different romantic acts, and across the time. And really interestingly, 80% of our participants would say that I love you is appropriate on a first date.
Wow, really?
Isn't that telling?
Wow.
I want this so much and I think that's what I'm meant to say.
Yeah.
Rather than, is it really what you're feeling, or are you feeling excited and you want to get to know this person more?
Yeah.
But is it love?
Yeah.
Because technically they're still a stranger.
Absolutely.
But it's really telling when we play that game.
That's excellent.
It's when they put those different sex acts at different times.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the game we say, but what if the other person doesn't agree?
Oh, what happens then?
Ooh, boundaries and consent. Snookered.
Gosh, I would love to sit in on one of your, classes, because, I know that, we've got one that happens here in Logan, and I literally walked past the room. I just went, oh, wow, there's actually a lot of them. I didn't realize that we filled that, that group, and just looking at them and seeing them, they seem really excited, being a part of it, and then having a conversation with them afterwards, like what I said, I just went, wow, boundaries was put in place straight away by this young lady, and the gentleman accepted it. And I know him so well. If that was, anyone else that has rejected him, they would have actually been sent, not a very nice text message. However, he respected it. So I think that's great. I love what you do.
There was a young man in South Australia who'd done all of our programs.
Yeah.
And after that, he did a Mates Before Dates.
Oh, yes.
Speed dating event.
Yes.
That has just come back due to popular demand.
Yeah.
I sounded like McDonald's then. But he went along and he asked a girl on a date. And unfortunately, she did say no. But he dealt with it. And before the course, he wouldn't have even spoken to a girl.
Yeah.
So it's like that's a really amazing accomplishment. And
Absolutely.
It's not always going to work, but he got back out there and tried again.
So I'd really like to know, you're looking at the younger age group, introducing, your modules to the younger age group. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because I really think it's needed, especially in that child protection space where, child safety is involved and a lot of sexualized behaviors, happen when they're very, very young.
I think originally Dateability was only for the age of consent and above. And that was a personal reason because sometimes the stories break my heart.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know if I could hear these stories from children.
Yeah.
However, somebody smacked me upside the head at an expo with a reality stick and was like, you're missing the boat.
Absolutely.
So it needs to come much sooner because sexual assaults have already happened by the age of consent.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about boundaries and consent and healthy relationships, not just dating, but friendships and online bullying much, much sooner.
Absolutely.
So the grand master plan is to have, a 13-year-old program, and that's level 1.
Yeah.
And then the next year they come back at 14 and do some repetition and a little bit more learning. So I'm still making sure that it's age appropriate. We can't be as overtly sexual positive as we are with the adults.
Yeah.
But making sure they understand what, healthy touch is.
Yes.
And you know, who has a right to touch me.
Yep.
I think is a really important discussion to be having. And I have that with my children who are 7.
Yeah.
And starting those conversations.
Well, they have to, you have to start that conversation quite young.
But I think that repetition, and also it means they're building their relationship over the years rather than it being a one conversation and now you're done.
Absolutely.
We're working with some schools. We've got a school program coming out in Queensland and New South Wales.
Yeah.
So we're wanting to work with schools more to get in because the teachers, they're trained to teach maths and English.
Absolutely.
Sex education might not be an area that they're comfortable with. So we're in schools doing both the relationship piece as well as the finance piece.
That's perfect. I love that. Love it. I love you. I love what you do. Thank you. Thank you for coming to chat with us.
Thank you for having me.
Like, this topic definitely needs to be spoken about. And like what I said, I love what you do. I've seen others who have attempted to try to do what you're doing. However, I don't think they're quite there yet. You're way, way beyond that. So, yeah, love to have you back.
Thank you for having me. See you soon.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Bye.